Hello and welcome to our final episode of the Backdoor Cut Podcast for this season. This is a season review. We go through our highlights of the year, our lowlights of the year, and our favourite moments from both a personal level and on a whole as well. So I hope you enjoy it. And now on to the podcast. Lads, welcome back to another episode of the Backdoor Cut Podcast, our final episode of the season. We kind of had a season and a half though, because our first four episodes, we were kind of just putting the feelers out and seeing if it would work.
And with a 6-month break.
When did we go? November to...
I think it was October we started. And then
No, we started in February.
When we went back
to record the second one.
Yeah.
So we released the last one in November and then we came back in February.
Right.
At the start of the
online ones were November, we stopped before Christmas, and then we got Sean Quigley, was the first one back?
Right,
when we came back here. Huh?
We did a good few online episodes.
Loads, actually, because we were just going through them off air. So our idea for this episode is to go through the season, all that we've learned, our mistakes, our lessons, the positive aspects of it, and maybe the negatives as well, and then some highlights of the year as well. So in terms of guests, because it's always hard when you're in it. It's very chaotic, and then just reading through the list of names of people that we've had on, as well as after the golf day was finished, and kind of for me during the golf day when I was presenting more so than playing. When I tried to be present, it was pretty unreal what we'd actually done, because when we got together in October for the first episodes, we were just kind of like, okay, what are we going to do here? What are we going to talk about? And we had topics for the first episode. We had a guest with Maddie Donnelly, and then we didn't know what we were going to talk about after that.
Yeah. Just came a long way since then, to be honest. Like, starting out, I honestly didn't think it would probably get to this stage. I don't know, it was unfamiliar kind of territory, to be honest. I always kind of thought of starting up my own podcast, so it made life a bit easier when
we do it all for you.
When you don't show up for us. I'm lifting and laying you today, so you'd want to shut your mouth.
Fucking 4 wrong turns to get there.
Only for Petey though, right enough. Like,
I know.
the host, I'd probably still have never started a podcast, but I think it's been pretty successful so far. Obviously, we would like to have probably got more guests on, and probably that's just the way it is. It's unfamiliar even for the athletes and the players that are coming on as well. So hopefully this is kind of a breakthrough, and we'll continue to grow it over the next year.
100%. Like, similar to that, the lessons from it have been class. I think my biggest lesson was the time commitments of it. You probably think, right, sure, we'll get this started and it'll be grand, it'll be plain sailing. You think it'll probably be easier than what it would be, and there is a lot of energy and time that does go into it. But on the flip side, like, we did the online stuff, and the in-person guests are just, the in-person episodes are just 10 times better than any online episode. Like, so you're willing to make, like, you're happy to make that sort of trade-off because you understand how it's going to be and how it's going to come across. Like, but I think when we got the golf day, we're just like, right, we're on to something here, even though it maybe took us about a year. I think once we got the golf day, some of the guests that we had there, some of the players that we had there, just like, fuck, this is class. So for our first day out, it was highly successful. Like, and then you're just going, right, well, where can we go from here? Like, so no, it's been an experience.
And I think it is going to get easier to get the players as well, because even when we were presenting them with the golf day, they couldn't even understand it really, some of them, because even though we're not the first GAA podcast, we're the first movers of this kind of content creation / GAA podcast, more informal players interviewing players essentially, with me just here trying to get stuff out of 2
on the show.
Yeah, but even when we presented that to them, they were like, so it's a free round of golf.
What's your fees?
Yeah, what's going on? How much do I, like, a couple of people are like, how much do I have to pay for green fees? And I was like, no, like, the first line in it is free. Like, it's free. We're just going to create some content off of it. So you just have to play golf and be a bit of crack. And we might as well go through a little bit of that. Like, that was that was some crack, really.
It was class.
It was long now, because I didn't anticipate how long it was going to take to shoot, interview, and then how many camera people you need. Like, and you have to wait for them to go out. And I think actually somebody told me last night that the sport in the Olympics with the highest fee for cameras was the golf, because you need so many cameras and you need them at multiple different holes. And then we did a mini format of that, and we might as well say, when we put it to a production company for it, the figure that they came back with was in the tens of thousands. It was closer to 100,000 euros than it was to, say, 20,000. Let's put it that way.
He fitted the bill.
I was like, okay, maybe that's not feasible. Let's try and explore other options. And we did manage to put it together. Now, we haven't got the content out yet, but I think it's going to be pretty good.
I think it'll be good. Yeah, like even like the setup that we're going for in terms of like the wee mini clips and episodes, like I think they'll be class. Like you see, sometimes you're flicking through and you see, can't remember who it is interviewing, like, but you see, was it Frank Lampard out in the golf course with someone, they're playing a bit of golf and he's getting so no, I'm looking forward to it. Like I think like the setup we had, just big shout out to Ryan, he pulled the squad together. Like Aaron's here helping out too.
It's so like the A team.
Literally we rocked down, we didn't know half these people and they just rocked down with like, what was it, like six of them.
Well, it does my own videos was there, and I was like, fuck.
You didn't know he was coming.
No, I hadn't a clue.
I think the biggest thing though was the players really enjoyed it. Like some of them, as I said, when me and you were leaving, there was 6 of them still there just chatting. Because would you ever get a chance to sit with other players and chat?
You just don't, like, ever. From like opposing teams.
Yeah.
Nah, you just give each other dogs abuse in the pitch and walk off and shake hands after. It's usually what happens. But
you know, you pass and chat, maybe you'll see them the odd time, and so 2 minute it's crack training or whatever. There's no in-depth stuff, like it's not a real conversation, it's very surface level, like
it's bluff chatting.
So when you actually have that time, and sure they were probably playing against each other on the day, like they were probably with each other 7-8 hours there, like, so
and they still wanted to stay longer.
To stay down afterwards. So that was class. Like
that was my biggest lesson from the year though, was like, as you said, how much time is needed to put together a podcast. Mine was how much time and effort is needed to put together a golf tournament. Like I kind of knew before we went in, it's not going to be straightforward, but different things cropped up at different times, different challenges, and I didn't anticipate it being that tough in the 2 weeks prior. I thought everything would be almost put together. But then, as I said to you in the message, like we actually did do it. Like it's done, completed, and we're facing into a season break, and we've actually we have a brand now, because people message me and they message you guys, I'm sure, and they say, "Oh, how are you going? I listened to the podcast." People listen to the podcast and have followed me because of the podcast, as opposed to at the start we were probably making the podcast for our current followers with a view to trying to build a brand and get our names more out there. But I suppose we have achieved that. Like,
yeah, 100%. Personally, my lesson, it's probably, it's the fear that's probably, I didn't realise there was as much fear within GA in the county players in terms of like actually getting people to speak and not even about stuff that's going on within team setups, just literally speak about anything that's going on in your life. And it's a lot more difficult to get that out of players, I think, than I thought it was at the start. I think we've normalised it to an extent now, and hopefully that is what I mean in terms of when I say next year we can build on that and get more players on and realise that it's a fairly normal thing that goes on in other professional sports, like, you know, whatever, NFL, whatever it is, basketball. You know, it's fairly normal for players to come out and talk, and in GA it's still not. But I think we've eventually made a bit of a breakthrough, and hopefully that expands the next year and we get more and more guests on, and we start to build even just as you always talk about players' own personal brands, and players start to see how much of a benefit it can actually have for them, because like we only play inter-county football for a finite amount of time, like until you're 30, 31, and then what happens after that really for a lot of players, you know. So having something there is extremely beneficial from a player's point of view, like.
And it was good to round it off actually with Barry O'Connor's episode, because he just put it all to bed. He was like, I've seen the other side, and like players should be getting a little bit more for what they're putting in here. And although it's been a challenge for us, I think it's been pretty easy for the players to come and talk to us. They just show up, sit down, have the chat. It's more the mental barrier of
what's the team going to say?
Yeah, what's everybody going to say?
Yeah.
So like, what has been the most, because like we have talked about other things, but what has been the most shocking thing that has been said by a player, do you think?
On the podcast?
On the podcast so far. That you didn't, like you said to yourself, Jesus, I didn't expect you to say that.
Probably just Barry's, where he was chatting about players, what they should be paid.
I think their whole sort of amazement or bemusement comes around the fact that GA players don't get paid, which is something that you asked me earlier about, you know, the differences and stuff. But that is one thing that I've completely changed my mindset on, having come back to Ireland. I feel so strongly that GA players need and deserve more. I don't think it's spoken about nearly enough. I think
it's a taboo. It's pressure on the carpet. Don't chat about that.
Oh, but it's not even spoken about by like yourselves, like, you know.
Really.
And you know, they're sort of just in shock. They're like, even this year, I was playing in a Sydney AFL league for half the year, and you know, there's a little bit of money involved in that. You know, and I'm gone home now to play. I've gone home to play with my home club, and you know, first thing I had to do was pay my membership, and they couldn't get over it. Just couldn't. Like, why are you doing that? Like, why would you play if you're not getting paid, kind of thing. So that's the big thing with those guys. Like they just couldn't justify it. Even when all those guys retire from AFL, they'll go back to like country clubs, and you know, some of them will go back and play with their local teams that have made enough money, but a lot of them will go off and they'll get paid $1,000 a game, $2,000 a game to play like in a country footy league, and literally just rock up for a game and leave again. And that's sort of that's the culture there. Whereas,
so that's probably not a good thing as a result of the payment. That side of things, the positive side is like the players that are playing at the top level are compensated for the work that they put into it and the commitment that they make.
Well, there was one. I was actually thinking, you know, I don't really do many of these things like podcasts or anything. But I was like, what am I going to talk about? There was one thing that I really wanted to speak about, and it was this.
I don't think anyone. I think everyone appreciates the amount of work that goes in, but I don't think anyone has come out and just going, yeah, they should be paid, and especially someone who's has seen it in both sides. And even said, like, don't get me wrong, like if I won a medal, it'd be unbelievable, like it'd be class, but like the time and energy that you're putting in, like it's mental. I was even thinking that, like, you know, when you're getting compared to people are looking at like AFL stats and here's the data, the numbers that they're hitting and all that sort of crack, and it's like, right, we're not too far off that, and that's sweet, but then you need to remember that's their full-time job. They're not going home and getting up for early for work the next day. They don't have, I'm sure they have all their stressors there, like, but their whole job is, or their whole life is built around performing for on a game day, like. So when Barry said that like, I'd kind of thought about it before, and I was like, I probably should, but then I was like, but it would take away from it. But then when you actually hear someone who's seen both sides of it, you're just like, it makes a lot of sense too, like. And I'd agree with them as well. That was probably the biggest thing. And then I suppose just players talking about managers just doing drills for drill's sake. It's refreshing to know that it goes on elsewhere, and sometimes you see it yourself and you're like, it's surely you look at elsewhere and you think the grass is always greener, but when you hear other players chatting about the same sort of things, it's like, right, we're all kind of we all end up in the same spot at some stage.
That was definitely the most shocking one for me. It was between two. It was probably when Conor Sweeney said that, and he said, well, let's be honest, sometimes we're doing drills and we don't know why the hell we're doing drills for. That was shocking to me, because you think that goes on at club level, but you don't think it goes on at intercounty level for some reason. Kind of similar to what Barry said about he gets an insight into Helen, who's like this world-class athlete, like one of the world's best, and he said she's not by the book, she's not to the letter of the law, she's just a normal person. And you have this rose-tinted view of professional sports that everything's done perfectly, and it's not. And then probably the other thing that was shocking to me was also recently was when Conor Whelan said, like, sometimes the reason you get in the door of an intercounty setup, it's almost bet out you in there, or coached out you.
I think in the GAA, I've found that a lot of times in intercounty setups that the reason you got brought in
is nearly bet out of you. That
literally just about.
It's literally just, we want you to do this and this, and I've seen the most talented players kind of get lost in, track and runners and doing all and I fully get the importance of it all, but I think, I've always felt that you've got to have that something else, that when you're coming to a ball, that he doesn't know if you're going to go left or you're going to go right, and he doesn't know if you go right, are you going to come back to your left or back to your right. And I'd have been ingrained in terms of developing both sides the same, being able to catch the ball anywhere from below your knee to above your shoulders. And I think being able to offer more than one or two attributes, I think then you work very hard on the actual skills of the game. And I think the skills of the game is actually probably getting lost in terms of conditioning and running and all these things, and people forget that it's mastery of your skills is what's the most important.
So that was quite shocking for me as well. Not that I knew that to be the case, but that a player of that stature in the hurling world felt that way as well.
Yeah,
that's probably why he's so successful as well,
because he kept that freedom, I suppose, to play. But that was one thing, I definitely, that had been my experience too. I can remember when I first came in, you were just playing with that sort of freedom, and you didn't really, not that you didn't care as much, but you're just going off the cuff because that's what you knew. And then the more you're maybe in that sort of environment, they're talking about giving the ball away, keep playing it safe, keeping possession, and then you start to go, you kind of retreat into your shell a wee bit. So whenever you said that, I was like, right, it just sparked something. And even just in the last couple of years, you're still getting kind of caught up and going, I'll play it safe, and not maybe take things on. Whereas you probably play your best when you're in that flow and you're not thinking, and you're just, sometimes, yes, don't get me wrong, sometimes you go off instinct and it's maybe not the right idea, or your execution's not great, but if it was maybe the right idea and the execution's poor, you're still going, but you're getting pulled up while you're trying that for, and then your next time you're probably second guessing it, whereas you maybe back yourself 6, 7, 8, 9 out of 10 times to pull it off, and then you're going, just a lot of hand pass here.
I think it's the way just GAs went in general, though. I don't think it's a case of coaches coming in and it's their fault for trying to make you play a certain way. I think there's a balance definitely to be had. There's players come in and they're far too off the cuff and they're just doing ridiculous things. But I think the way the game's gone now, how it is so structured, and the way how structured defensive teams are, how structured you have to be in attack to be able to create scores, I think that's nearly dictated how we're coached now in terms of what we're being told to do and what we're being told not to do. For example, if you're playing against a team who plays 13-14 behind the ball, obviously you're going to try and tell a forward who loves to shoot from 50 yards to maybe keep the ball, because it's you need to be a bit more intricate to create scores. So that balance, we could go down a whole rabbit hole here about rule changes and all again, but I think we've talked enough about that probably over the last couple of months.
In relation to guests then, because look, it's never easy to pick favourites. Do you have a favourite episode or favourite guest, and maybe a favourite takeaway from the guest?
Yeah, I do. Just because for me at the time it was so relevant, and it was Matty Donnelly when it was our first ever guest episode, and I was obviously in a bit of a hoop in terms of my own injury problems at that stage, and Matty was going through his own injury struggles, and it was just about that kind of side of things where he talked about how you're judged. When you put your hand up to play, you're going to be judged as if you're 100% fit to play by everyone who watches you.
The thing I have made peace with is, doesn't matter what state you're in going on the game, if you make yourself available, you'll be judged as being 100% fit. So that's the other thing you need to make peace with. Nobody cares that you're sore. They just care about the output on the pitch. So yeah, it's probably something that's helped shape my decision making as well when I'm going through those scenarios now. Is if I'm not able to contribute to the team, then I'll sit it out. A bit easier now than I would have previously. For me, that was something I probably hadn't thought about. I would have went out playing for Fermanagh last year. Geez, I'm at 60-70%, but everyone obviously knows that. But how would anyone who's watching that isn't at training or isn't at the games or isn't talking to you regularly know that? So yeah, it's a lesson. It's
is it worth your while going out and playing at 50-60%, making yourself worse, and also people judging you as if, you know, probably thinking that you're just way off the pace, or you're not at the level, when really you had the balls to put your hand up and actually play at that level. So that was my biggest lesson. And there was probably 5, 6, 7 lessons that came out of that episode that I probably can't recall as well right now, but I just remember that having a kind of profound impact on me when I left the room that day.
I remember when he said, if you're not enough of a man without the medal, you'll never be enough of a man with the medal, and the air just left the room. It was like, wow.
Someone said to me, he was like, if you're not enough of a man before you've got the medal, you're not going to be once you get it. And that kind of changed my outlook, and still didn't mean I was desperate to get it, but there's a lot of people out there with all-Ireland medals and medals falling out of their pockets, and they're not the person you'd want to be when you're 20, 30 years older. So you can get very consumed by the medal, and it's a validation for what you do and where you're from, but I say it's not the be all and end all either. But
that was probably my favourite moment from that episode. Owen, did you have a favourite guest or takeaway?
Guest wise, there was loads. I would agree with the Molly Donnelly's one being up there. Purely from a personal standpoint, like I think I was maybe 14, 15 or something when he started coming on the scene, and just sort of following him the whole way through, and then seeing how he operates. Would obviously been someone that I looked up to and took a lot from. So that was class, just to get chatting to him in more depth. Exact same point as McGurn says, like same sort of thing the last couple of years, and was like trying to play through and manage through. And at the end of the day, if you're putting your hand up to play, like you're going to be judged if you're 100%. So that was a big lesson for me. Richie's as well was a quality one. I think the two of them, I don't know what to do. They just sit in the house and read books and talk these deep conversations. Stoics. But between them two and Miller, they must just be sitting drinking coffees and reading books. But no, Richie's was class. Like in terms of he's had his fair share of injuries, and he said that he might have been the other side of Matty, where he might have been pulling out too soon when he maybe could have pushed on a wee bit. Obviously he still had plenty of injuries and stuff, but then even just the personal side of things, having like stuff going on outside of football, getting that sort of perspective and like your identity not being completely built up, and just he said Richie Donnelly the footballer, like, so he went into a room when he wasn't a Tyrone footballer, and he was like, I'm only here because people knew he was a decent footballer. I played for Tyrone. He's like, right, how do I build myself up to something where it's more than that? Like, and I suppose that's something like I definitely get caught up into. Like for months of the year, it's like, right, Owen McGabe the coach, Owen McGabe the footballer, and you forget about everything else that's going on there. It's probably only a recent thing where you're like, they are things that you do rather than who you are, sort of thing. So food for thought there was quality. And then as well as that, he had the, again, going back to the injuries, he spoke about it's your body at the end of the day. So if you want to go and speak to a certain person or try a certain thing, like it should be well on. You should be allowed and encouraged to do that. It's your choice at the end of the day. But I think because with county setups these days, everything is there for you. You almost feel guilty not using it, or you want to keep people happy to an extent, and you're like, right, I want to go here. But even I think when we're in the circle, we're in this sort of environment, we know people are doing good things, we know we can go elsewhere, we're private coaches ourselves, so we know we can go privately to other coaches and have a look at things, and sometimes you don't want to rub people up the wrong way, but then when it comes down to the end of the day, those people that are in the setup might be gone in a year, 2 years, and they'll not, you might not be any much further along, or if you had took the time to have the hard conversation in the short term, it could benefit you so much more in the long term. Like, so that's definitely something that I have taken and will probably apply going forwardly.
One thing that I didn't anticipate that has come out of a lot of the episodes was the guilt and frustration of a lot of athletes. So that episode in particular, I didn't anticipate the guilt of Richie saying he went into a room and people looking at him a certain way and respecting him, and him being like, why do you respect me? Like, I don't, like, I'm just a footballer. So you respect me, you don't even know me. I didn't anticipate that. And then from a frustration standpoint, I think Kevin Feely and Ronan Jones episodes were really good in that they were with players that were playing like playing well. Kevin Feely was shooting the lights out this year, but the team wasn't winning. And then there was a lot of frustration there because they're feeling the pressure from fans and they're wanting to play well for fans and succeed, but the fans aren't helping matters at all. It's particularly Kevin saying, like, I wish people could come down and watch training and see we're doing a lot. We're doing our level best to get out of this hole. And then from Ronan's episode, when he said, I think because Meath won a few All-Irelands back in the day, people feel like we should be winning them now, where we're competing against bigger counties with more resources. It's going to be difficult. I didn't really anticipate that. And I also didn't anticipate us getting on players from teams that were losing as much as we did, because I thought the teams that were winning were the teams that would want to come on and talk about winning. Unfortunately, they were actually the ones that didn't want to come on because they almost didn't want to upset the apple cart. Like, they didn't want to throw things off at all. Was there anything that kind of was unanticipated for you lads around that aspect of people being honest and open and sharing their feelings?
Probably just getting people in the first place. Like, again, just emphasize that idea of the hush hush sort of culture and how like closed off you actually are from players. Like, obviously it's something that we've spoke about time and time again, where you are putting yourself out there, and initially there may be a wee bit of friction, but then after a while, once you're doing it, people are like, all right, it's just what he does. Or the idea of like you build it up in your head to be so much bigger than what it is, and then once it's actually out there, nobody really cares. Like, but I think it just reinforced that, and I suppose it backs up why we're trying to do this and trying to get more people on. But yeah, I think it was surprising that how much players can be closed off from like opening up and speaking. Like, I think that was the biggest shock. You thought maybe because we were players too and we were getting players on that more people would be open to it, but I'm sure we still have work to do there. Like,
absolutely.
I think I can see, as a player myself, and you're a player obviously, within those environments, I have been able to throughout the year see both sides of that coin. I know at times you got quite frustrated with certain aspects of it when people were, pulling out or whatever, but as a player, when you're in that environment, you're winning, you're like, right, let's keep this hush hush. You're losing, you're just absolutely frustrated, and you're like, the last thing I want to do is go and talk to anyone about what just happened. So you can kind of see both sides of that, but then also I can see the side of why it's good to come out and talk and how nothing bad comes of it, because I've been there and I've done it for the whole year.
Yeah.
And now a player hasn't had that experience before who's within an inter-county setup. It's just that fear that they have of the unknown, I suppose. And again, as we're talking about, like, we've done it now for a year, we've had players on, in fact they've probably got good things from it instead of bad over the last 6 months. So yeah, hopefully we can build.
That's the idea. And I think my frustration usually comes down to, and you've probably noticed this as well, is I don't mind when people say no. Yeah. It's when people say they're going to do something and they don't do it, that drives me up a wall. And that's always been the case. I don't know why. It's like honouring your commitment or something, or a respect thing. And it's a personal battle, I suppose, that I have to navigate. But one thing that stood out to me then as well was from the players that have played in Australia coming back, talking about, well, like, when you lose a game over there, they still put up the post saying well done, and it's like you've hit these stats and everything. But unfortunately in Ireland, it's like, you lost, now shut the fuck up basically and get in your box and don't come out of your room now for the week. Nothing bad happens out of going and being candid and being open. Actually, probably only good things happen. So Sarah's episode, when she was talking about the attitudes down there, and then Vicky's episode as well of like her not understanding it when she went out there, but now understanding it, were really insightful, as well as obviously Barry's too. And like, we're trying to, I suppose the idea came for me from what's going on down under in the AFL and the NRL, but we're trying to stand out and do it our own way here as well, I suppose. So it is slightly different, and we understand it's slightly different for athletes here, but I almost think it's probably more important and serving more of a purpose, because those athletes out there are getting paid, whereas the ones here, what do they have outside of football in their profession? They probably should be getting something extra for what they're putting in. So that's what we're trying to do, I guess, and that's been a positive. Was there anything from those episodes with Vicky and Sarah that stood out to you?
He's thinking there. I'd say maybe.
You're there, the Sarah one.
Yeah, it wasn't at the Vicky one, but listen to it back. The Sarah's one, just like the big thing that stood out was like how focused on the process they were. Like anything that she spoke about, it was just like back to the process, and how detail oriented she was. Like even when she was chatting about like, right, I want to try and make the World Cup squad here for the Ireland women. So it was like, right, who do I need to speak to? Who do I need to go to? And literally like almost like a waterfall effect of like every single step that needs to, like, I was just like, that's the attention to detail and the thinking that goes into that.
Yeah, well, like it was like step one, it was like you want to go back to a sport that you love. Step two, are you happy in AFL? Do you want to long-term go out of AFL? Step three, you need to get signed for a professional club. How are you going to do that? You haven't played the game for 8 years, an absolute long shot. So then I got signed for Melbourne Victory. Then it was like I ran out of game time there. So I was like, I need to sign with another team. Will I try to go somewhere in Europe? So it was like, yeah, there was steps along the way. And then any time I became outcome focused, like I lost the process. And I remember a time when I played my first game at Melbourne Victory, and you talk about sliding doors moments and moments in your career, but played my first game for Melbourne Victory. Didn't care, was like, there's no expectations here. Like I shouldn't be any good today. Played well because I was relaxed. And then I remember Vera texted me to say like, I'll watch your game next week. And there was a camp coming up for America, and like I was in consideration for that camp, and I knew I was, and I was like in contact and all this. Played the next week, had an absolute mare, and I was like, because the pressure got to me.
It removes a lot of the, I imagine that removes a lot of the stress and worry. Like obviously you put met Sarah that day, she's not stressed and worried about anything really, like, but apart from being late for that episode.
But she was after that,
she was 100%. Yeah. But you can imagine, like, if you have that whole, like, literally every single detail was accounted for there, like what would go well, what could go wrong, what obstacles could come up. And like, I think when you have everything down to a T like that, it's very much just like, sure, I'll follow these steps, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't, and then we'll go on to the next thing and start again. Like, so I think that just reminding yourself of the process instead of getting caught up and need a big game this weekend. It's like that first thing, like, right, what are you having for breakfast that Monday morning? What sessions have you get done that week? All that sort of crack. That was massive. Like, I suppose the other side of it was just their openness, how natural they were when they were just chatting to us, and like in terms of like we're not media, like, but then you can imagine, like, even anytime I'm on Instagram now, I saw Rose doing another podcast. I think she's hosting the podcast now, is she?
Wonder where she got the idea.
We'll take royalties. But yeah, just like how natural it is for them. I think we've spoken about it before in terms of the women's game, maybe having to promote themselves a wee bit more, but like when they get the opportunity, they're going for it, and they come across, they're just, I don't think they care as much as I think fellas. Maybe it's an ego thing for fellas, like maybe status, and they want to not be seen as being open for criticism, maybe. But
from chatting to Sarah before, like, and even on the podcast, she knows that it's necessary in order to get female sport the same attention that male sport has. Yeah. So they're already behind. So then they're like, well, we need to do more than what the men do. Yeah. And sometimes men are like just very closed off, I suppose, and focused on themselves, and they're like, well, I just want to play football, which is perfectly fine as well. Yeah. But then if that's your,
don't complain
if nobody's showing up, basically. That's what I'd say. Yeah.
I think just to go back to what Owen was talking about there in terms of the lessons from those episodes, just as you were speaking, it kind of reminded me of Vicky's episode when she talked about just like how she questions, it comes back to the drills side of things, and like if they're doing a drill that she thinks isn't having an impact, then she's going to speak up and she's going to say it. And it's something in the men's game, I don't know if it's the same with you, like, but if I'm doing a drill and I think it's shit, I'll just turn around to the boy beside me, I'll go, this is fucking shit and it's not worth a shite. But I'd rarely go to the manager and actually say it to him, which is something that probably should happen, is that open conversation, and it seems to be there in the women's game at a higher level anyway, and they seem to set very high standards for themselves across the board, you know, at that higher level, which is probably not even done as well in the men's game, to be honest, from what I can see.
In our environments anyway.
That's what I was just about to say, and that is
Division 3.
getting me thinking, What has been the funniest moment of the podcast for you, or the funniest episode?
You know the answer.
Yeah.
Sean Quigley has to be. Aye, just
good crack.
any chance he got to have just thrown a wee hand grenade like he was throwing it. But a lot of stuff that he's saying is bang on too, and like I suppose we're probably the truth or like what's maybe right lies somewhere in the middle. Like we understand that like the skill is a big part of it. He's pure skill, pure football. If you can't fucking kick a ball over the bar, then you're no use, which 100%. But at the same time, if you're not fit for the demands of the sport too, like you're not going to be, a lot of players who aren't just pure unbelievable footballers or hurlers aren't going to thrive as much as other players can get away with. Like, so I think the element is in both, but even if you do have that class amount of skill and it's just pure talent, which you obviously work on as well, if you can move faster, you're fitter, you can get about the pitch a lot easier, you're going to be able to express that skill to a far higher level, like on a consistent basis. So but no, it was class just hearing his approach, and just it was fresh for, you know, sometimes we can get people on who are into their training, they're into their S&C and all the rest, and they can back up what we think, and we think we're the most important people at the end of the day. But then he's just going, just get the ball in your hands and kick the ball and be able to kick off both feet and hand pass off both hands.
And when he took us all down a peg as well, that was my favourite moment. I think my funniest moment when he said, I think it's gone so fitness orientated because of the online coaches, and then obviously he had his punchline, which was great. In terms of the year then, for you guys personally, the season, do you have a pit of the year and then a peak of the year? So the pit being the lowest point, the peak being your best point or your best moment?
Probably the year as a whole wasn't amazing. From last August basically, like just it's been very heavily get the body right to get back to a certain level, and there's been glimpses where you're like, right, I'm back, I'm feeling class, and then you break down again, and then you try to build back up, and then you get back for a couple of games, and you're just like, I think the pit was probably the week before the Ulster Championship for me, where we had an in-house game the week before, and I just knew in my head, I was like, I don't know if I'll make it the next weekend here. Like I came back and played two, that was my peak, getting in the wing forward for 2 games, and then when it came to the championship, like the week before, I remember saying to Dackie Lynch, like I was just going, I don't think I'm fit for next weekend, like, and then don't know how the next week I felt unbelievable, and then after the game again I was just like, I'm mangled here, like, and then that was obviously season done at that stage, like, but I think refreshing wise is just when you knew you're like, right, something is done here, need to take a longer term approach, and when you accept that, then I think it was easier to accept because it'd been setback. Once you'd accepted that, then you're just like, right, you kind of had it rode off, reset, go and enjoy yourself a wee bit, and get ready for 2025. Like, so, yeah, bit of a mixed bag. Like,
yeah, Pitt without a shadow of a doubt is in Antrim. 8 points up against Antrim in the second half. They come back and beat us, and then
they brought him on. That's what happened.
Then you see fucking this Wawa out in the pitch turn into John Cena, getting absolutely headlocked. But I was definitely the Pit. But
we didn't hear from you for 3 days after that. I think we kind of just left you.
I was hiding under a rock.
Did I get an Instagram for you or a message from you? You just came on the live. You just came with you and. I think it was your Berlin trip. I think there was a couple of years commenting on it. I'll chat to you later.
Dara also unfollowed you and followed you after that.
That was a mistake.
Monday morning I got a follow back. Darren McGurn started following you.
Oh fuck. Peak. I was going to say now it's just the peak in terms of getting back, playing a full, run of games, but it was probably when I first came back and got minutes on the pitch and actually had an impact. That's probably the peak. I remember I came on against Armagh, it was the first time back, but I wouldn't say that was peak because we got hammered and I didn't feel great, and I still wasn't confident that I was back at the level, if you get me. But it was probably the first time I came on in one of the Talent Cup games, made an impact, got a score, caught a kick out for us to kind of secure the game at the end, and that was when I started to think, right, I'm back moving well, I'm back having an impact. And we had just won the game by like a point, so that was probably peak of the year. But yeah, the last probably month or two has been brilliant as well. I've played every minute of every league game and done really well in them, and probably felt back to my best from a skills point of view, but also from an athletic point of view as well, which is good. And first championship game this weekend, so buzzing for that.
It's been interesting watching you over the course of the season coming in the room when
Depressed,
you've been in a jock, like, and you've been sore or you've played loads of minutes but you haven't been ready, versus that day when you featured and you played well.
Yeah.
And you came in, it's like finger guns, everything, like we do it. But that just shows how much it matters to you.
It matters. That's something that we, when it comes to the identity side of things, and you're like trying to convince yourself that, your whole identity is not playing Gaelic football, but a large part of it is, and that's just being completely honest, like, and it has been that way for years. That's probably why I've went down the road I have now with the online side of things. So yeah, like, it's probably what I think about 90% of the time is playing GA, or how I can get myself in the best position to be at my peak in terms of performance, all those kind of things. It's nearly what dictates half my decisions when it comes to nutrition, training, lifestyle, all of those things. So yeah, my mood is obviously going to be hugely dictated off the back of that. But it's, I suppose, the mood in terms of, like, when you said I come in and I'm probably not in great form, that was probably more so the fact that, like, you're in pain, or you've had a bad session, or you've not been picked for a squad, or things like that there kind of dictate that.
It was mainly the pain side of things, I think.
Yeah, it was like coming from maybe a training the night before and running through an 8 out of 10 pain for the whole session and thinking, fuck, I'm back at square one, that kind of side of things. And just thinking about whether you're ever going to get back, that was probably thoughts that went through the head at certain times as well. But yeah.
Plans for next year then? We're definitely going to change the format somewhat, I would say. But I think the last few weeks, actually, since the season has finished, have definitely given me more hope for next year and, like, more optimism than the few weeks of the All-Ireland finals where we were struggling to get guests. What do you think we need to change next year, if anything? Or do you have any ideas and plans for next year?
Don't go away. Nah, I'm only joking. Probably just plan better in advance in terms of, like, getting guests, and me and Owen, probably you do a lot of the messaging DMs. Like, I probably could be better on that front myself in terms of just having more conversations with players. And yeah, I suppose that was probably a large part of the problem last year, would you say? In terms of, like, we were rushing to probably have conversations, and then it was just
scrambling maybe on a Saturday or Sunday, who can we get for Monday here, that sort of thing.
I think the major thing for me anyway was the reason we were scrambling was because people would commit and then drop out, but also our outreach for guests, and because we're all running businesses as well, we don't have that much time to dedicate to it. So I think there is a role there for somebody that produces the podcast essentially and does all that outreach for us. And now we've built such a brand that maybe other brands are going to be willing to align with us, and then we might be able to, like, essentially give someone a role and compensate them for doing that. They obviously would have to be pretty in the know in GA circles and know a lot of people, but it's a good opportunity, I think. And that's probably what I changed, because the problem was that we're all so busy with different things. And as you said, like, it ended up me messaging, like, some days 50 people, which was ridiculous because that was taken away from the business. I think the change isn't for you lads to do more outreach. It might be. That's an alternative. But a better change would be for none of us to do outreach, or to do less and somebody else do a lot more. That's probably the change that I'd have. And then, as you said, organising in advance and having probably a team of producers and videographers that are available to record. I think that was probably another issue, was trying to get studios.
Yeah. We did, I think the Dublin one did work well for a lot of it. And then obviously when they're a bit further afield, you have to travel there. But I suppose that's, again, it comes back to the idea of the in-person conversations are 10 times better. Like, and just one thing that we have to, like, I suppose we have to accept, like, too. But yeah, I think having everything under the one roof would be ideal. Sometimes we're chopping and changing, we're going one place for one thing and then another place for another thing. But it'd be class if we just had everything under the one bracket. People could outreach for us, get things set up, and do everything else. Like so,
I think as well though, we know all of us that it's never going to be straightforward
yeah.
and easy. There's always going to be mishaps. It's just probably having someone to deal with them rather than us dealing with them and then taking away from what we're doing elsewhere.
Is it Darry the CEO or Chris Williamson's podcast? I think there's like 30 people on the podcast team. Like, so
30 Chris Williamson.
We've Pete.
But yeah, I'm definitely more optimism. Can't wait for the golf content to go out. Anything else you want to go over about the season before we finish?
Predictions for the club season?
Actually, there is something to go out, to go over that's probably relevant to listeners more so than plans for the future. What was your highlight of the GAA season from a non-personal perspective?
Galway beating Dublin.
Yeah.
I think that was a milestone. It was like, when was the last time Dublin was beaten in All-Ireland quarter-final? Like, what, 15 years ago? Or maybe 13, 14 years ago? I think that is nearly just like it's probably it's a massive thing for the counties who are trying to compete. Obviously, Olarma has after going. That's probably the biggest for a lot of people. But I think Galway beating Dublin nearly set that up. So yeah, now I think it gives a lot of teams hope moving forward in terms of like the top 8 to 10 teams. Like, there's a lot of talk about Dublin now that could be potentially the beginning of the downfall. And I don't probably agree with that myself, but I think it definitely closes the gap anyway.
Probably Armagh win the Ireland, to be fair. When you see, I don't want to say they're massive outsiders, like, but nobody would have called it at the start of the year. And when you've played against those lads and you kind of, you know it if you see them so often because you've been playing against them, and you're kind of like, when you've been playing against them too, you can obviously see that they're operating at a higher level, but on like an individual basis, bar a couple, you're like, right, yes, there's some magic players there, but a lot of the time it's like you would back yourself when you're playing against someone or when you're marking one of them, and you would like to think if you were taken out and put in that team, you'd be able to play a role there. Like, so I think from that perspective, it's like, right, and you see that even they were Division 3. Andrew played them in Division 3, like maybe 2017 or 18.
Yeah.
And you're kind of going like, right, well, we just need to, there's something to aspire to. Like, obviously there's a lot of work that goes into that, and I'm like, you hear some of the stories of the work that them boys do, like, so you're not taking that away from it all, like, which is class, but then it gives that to be like, right, the juice is worth the squeeze sort of thing, like, if you put the work in, you raise the standards, I suppose. So plus just seeing an outsider winning and just their fans going absolutely mental was class. Even the players got on the rip for about 10 days afterwards, like, you were going fair play.
3 weeks.
We couldn't get hold of them.
It's also just on that point, like, it was kind of satisfying to see Kieran McGeeney win in All Ireland after him getting absolutely dogged for years. Like, the criticism, I've never seen the like of it in my life, and to go and just shut every single one of them up, and to even see them all coming out on Twitter and saying, you know, I hold my hand up, I was wrong. I don't know, it's just great to see, because
some of them
because he actually did like phenomenal work. Like, there was no fluke there. It was like, what, probably 7-8 years of consistent keeping a squad together, building extreme, you know, athletic conditioning. Like, them boys are off the charts in terms of strength, speed, conditioning, and to see that come to fruition. And then obviously he's also adapted, and he's brought in coaches nearly every single year because he's seen his weak points or whatever to try and improve things. So from what I could see anyway, it just seems so deserving to go in to win in All Ireland, and to shut a lot of people up was great to see as well.
The best thing about that as well, I loved his interview with Canavan before the final.
Quality.
Like, McGeeney, it doesn't seem, within the dressing room he's probably different, but outside of it, he doesn't pay any heed to the lads that say anything about him, because he knows
he's choking about it, probably.
But he knows their opinion doesn't matter as well. Like, they're just making noise. Like,
how many managers now are going to go, give me 10 years? Give me 10 years. Give me another 7 years here after 3 years.
So I'm going to cheat this question because I'm trying to think of one and I can't think of one. Year 2 ones were probably on the list as well. There was a few milestones, so
both in hurling and in football,
in a similar vein to what you said, Galway and Dublin. in the podcast
Cork
space.
beating Limerick
in the Munster Championship. So we'll continue to change with the times. Well. And the final of the hurling next year. Thanks for the year, lads. An even better match than that, which I didn't think was possible. Like one of the best hurling matches in recent memory. And then because of all the criticism and all the negativity, my third moment probably stands out even more than those was the Ulster final, when football was played in a manner that was exciting, entertaining, and people were sitting back and going, Jesus,
first half. This
isn't half bad here. Because that is possible, and that does happen as well. It's just, I think there is a culture of negativity for whatever reason that we kind of have to overcome, and that we're trying to overcome. So there's been tons of highlights, but maybe some people would tell you otherwise, I guess.
Yeah, it's been massive. It's been so much throughout the year, like that you couldn't have called. Like even Donegal, their performances, and probably unlucky not to get past Galway on that day as well. Yeah, like there was loads.
A lot of change.
Change is good,
both in hurling and in football, which is good to see.
And in the podcast space as well. So we'll continue to change with the times, and we're excited for next year. Thanks for the year, lads.
Cheers, Pete. Cheers for all the work.